Welcome to this edition of In-Depth Alaska. I'm John Thompson, and I had the opportunity to speak with Senator Dan Sullivan on Thursday afternoon. We covered topics from possibly reopening the military base at Adak to the fentanyl crisis in Alaska. Here is that conversation.
Yeah, let's, I guess, start with this. If you don't mind, talk about the significance of this base in Adak and kind of where we're at with that.
Well, look, John, this is a big deal. The Indo-PACOM commander, he had told me this, in a classified setting. It's not classified, though, by the way, in a hearing. But this was in a public hearing today when he was testified in front of the Armed Services Committee saying, absolutely, we need to reopen the base at Adak, Alaska. In the hearing, I pressed him. He agreed with me on how strategic it was. He's the Indo-PACOM commander. The NORTHCOM commander came out about 4 weeks ago in a hearing, said we got to reopen the base in Alaska. The CNO of the Navy, that's the Chief of Naval Operations, he came to see me and brief me about a team that they sent last week to Adak to look at reopening, the plan to reopen. They're supposed to have the plan to me inside of 2 weeks, but this is a huge deal. This base is actually 1,000 miles further west than Hawaii. Most people have no idea of the geography. And it used to be, one of the most strategic submarine bases, naval air stations, a huge pier operations that can handle surface warfare ships, and giant fuel storage, one of the biggest fuel storage depots in the world. And with all the Russian and Chinese activity in the North Pacific and the Arctic, particularly both in terms of joint naval task forces by the Russians and Chinese, and joint strategic bomber task forces by the Russians and Chinese in our waters and in our air. This is a really important strategic piece of real estate that now we can set up subs, surface warfare ships, and aircraft to jump them when they're coming into our territory much, much quicker. So I'm going to continue to work really hard on that. One of our goals is try and get this in our budget reconciliation bill soon, but to have the top admiral in the Navy, the top Indo-PACOM commander, and the top NORTHCOM commander all in the last 3 or 4 weeks come out and say, we got to rebuild and reopen the Adak, Alaska Navy base. It's big news. And it's something I've been working on for 10 years.
That's incredible. Kind of the way you've set it up. I mean, it get me excited. Why would they have even closed this?
Well, it's honest to gosh, it's a great question. It's a super great question. This was closed in the 1990s when we had the peace dividend and everybody thought the world was going to be safe and the end of history. You remember all that. And they started bracking, that's the military term for shutting down bases around the country. And they shut this one down. And I'll tell you, and as I've said in the hearing today, I have it on good authority that the Chinese shipping companies have come out to the owners of Adak, maybe once a year saying, hey, we'd be interested in that base. And, of course, that's probably a front for the, Chinese Navy. So I pressed the Admiral today. I said, Admiral, how embarrassing would that be if, the Navy let this incredible, just look at a map, how strategic this piece of terrain is, to have the Chinese there. So I was kind of pressing the Pentagon, let's go, guys. Let's get it done. Our great, the Aleut Corporation, I know, would welcome the chance to provide a, long-term lease to the Navy, and the state of Alaska is interested. So they were all out there last couple of weeks doing a site assessment, and I'm supposed to get that back in the next week or two from the Navy, from the NORTHCOM commander, and we're gonna reopen that base, and I'm really excited.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, and look forward to seeing.
Yeah, and we'll send you a press release on it that has the clip and the exchange between me and Admiral Paparo. It was just a couple hours ago that it happened.
Cool. All right. Well, fingers on the pulse. We're right there. I love that.
Yeah, you can. That's all. That's all the action. That's big news. Just like this FAA story. I'm really glad you're interested in it because it's big news too.
It is. So congratulations. I mean, that's $25 million investment from the FAA. So I guess, and this is another thing that's been in the process, because I know a lot of people will go right to the Bering Air crash, but this is something that's been years in the making, right?
Yeah, this is an initiative that I launched with the FAA. It's called the FAA Alaska Safety Initiative, FOSI, as we call it. And in last year's FAA bill, I got a provision that said, hey, we need to ramp up the FOSI initiative to bring crash rates down. The NTSB did a big study in 2020, and they found that Alaska had the highest crash rates and the highest fatality rates in the country. So, about 5 years ago, I was working with the FAA saying we have to bring these rates down. That's when we launched this initiative. Last year in the FAA reauthorization bill, I was able to get this $25 million provision authorized to bring a lot more infrastructure, but it's just a down payment, John. We need a lot more than that. And so this is the Trump administration working with us. There's been a lot of stories about the Trump administration cutting, but this is the Trump administration coming to Alaska saying, hey, we know this is a priority. And I will tell you this, we have a really good friend in the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Duffy. After the Bering Air crash, he called me, Senator, what can we do? We did a joint press conference, you might remember, that I hosted at the actual Secretary's headquarters, the Secretary of Transportation. And since that time, he's reached out to me 2 different times. Hey, what more can we do? And then they called just 2 days ago saying, we saw your FAA provision on the $25 million. We're going to appropriate for it right now. And this is a down payment because they said we need to do more. So this is going to go to what they call AWAS. It's essentially weather infrastructure in our rural communities. A lot more airports will have weather reporting systems. And the really exciting thing here is it's using new technology to link to satellites to make this much more efficient and much more timely. So it's a big announcement. We all want safety in our skies in Alaska. It's been a huge priority of mine being on the Commerce Committee that oversees aviation. And this is the Trump administration saying, hey, we are going to help Alaska, not just our economy and resources, but we're going to help with safety. And Sean Duffy is becoming a really good friend of our great state, the new Secretary of Transportation.
That is pretty cool. And I was going to ask you about that press conference and if you've heard anything more, in terms of, because I know you're pretty close to it, the Bering Air crash. And if we if something like this $25 million investment would have been able to prevent something like we saw here not too long ago.
Well, look, at that press conference you saw, we had it was kind of interesting. I hosted it. I asked to host it. And the secretary graciously said, why don't we do it in my press briefing room, which was great. It was kind of interesting. That was his first press conference as the new Secretary of Transportation. And it was with the Alaska delegation, the head of the FAA and the head of the NTSB, and of course, Secretary Duffy. The point of that press conference was to give an update on the Bering Air crash, which again, our hearts go out to the families and victims of that crash. We're a big state, but we're a small state. And when you have deaths like that from aviation crashes or anything, it impacts so many people. We all know each other so well in Alaska. So since that press conference, there's been a preliminary report. It's looking at things like the weight of the aircraft, the weather, and also things like what the tower was getting in terms of communications. The tower in the Nome area, and the lessons that we need to learn from that, the NTSB is already starting to process. I've been briefed on it. I don't want to get ahead of them, but I think the final report is going to talk about some of the things that I just mentioned. And I would imagine it's going to talk about more real-time communications, right? If the tower in Nome had information on weather, the ability to get that out to pilots that are actually flying in the region, I think might be something that they're going to dig into, and I think that's important. So all of these things come together in terms of our aviation, but getting more weather reporting and the infrastructure to do so in all of our airports, think about it, and this is what I pressed the secretary on it, and this is why I've made so much progress in the FAA bills, because the last year's FAA bill, I think, had almost 28 amendments solely focused on Alaska. But what I've been able to do in the committee is tell my Senate colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, hey, look, you guys have all of this infrastructure, and you're in the lower 48. You wouldn't even accept an airport not having the kind of runway and weather reporting and other infrastructure that you have down there. And we don't have that. Yeah, it's more expensive in Alaska, but too bad. We're all Americans and we should have that. The FAA system is for the whole country, doesn't exclude Alaska. So that's why I've been able to get so many of these provisions in these bills, because I think most senators, you know, they kind of say, all right, Dan, that's a legit argument. So we're going to keep pressing it, but to have the secretary really, really be working closely with me and our team, it matters. And you're seeing that right now. This is an important down payment for more safety in Alaska.
Down payment. All right, more to come, but it's a great start, right? And
yeah, it's a very, very good start. And Sean Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, boy, I'll tell you this, John, he's keeping his promise to me. He told me after that Bering Air crash, and by the way, during his confirmation hearing, way before the crashes, I pressed him on the FOSI initiative. I pressed him on aviation safety in Alaska. Said, Senator, I will be a big supporter of that initiative. And boy, oh boy, he's keeping his word and coming through for us.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you. I know your time is tight here, but do you mind if I ask a couple general questions from the newsroom real quick?
Sure.
Just like stock market today, you know, oil prices and the permanent fund, education funding. Just kind of wanted to get your general thoughts. Are you concerned at all? I know you're watching it close.
Well, look, I don't watch the stock market every day. It's obviously been up and down. What I've been doing is focusing my attention on getting more resources developed in Alaska. You know, when you talk about the permanent fund, I'm not going to second guess stocks going up, stocks going down. They've been on a good run lately. My goal is to work with our state, our legislature, our governor to get more revenue, to get more oil in the pipeline. And I'll tell you this, we are looking at some giant opportunities here. We had the 70 executive orders from President Biden and the National Democrats that spent 4 years crushing our state, shutting us down. By the way, laying off hundreds, if not thousands of people. Not a lot of press reports on that, but Joe Biden's 70 executive orders exclusively focused on Alaska, put a lot of good Alaskan workers out of work. And President Trump came in and said, I'm not going to do that. To the contrary, I'm going to get rid of those. I'm going to unleash Alaska. His first day, he issued an executive order to unleash Alaska's extraordinary resource potential and our economy. And there's not a day that goes by that I'm not talking to the cabinet. I talked to the president 2 days ago about all this. They are very motivated to get our economy moving again, get private sector jobs going, get more wealth creation, put more oil in the pipeline. And the one thing we're seeing, John, that's really exciting is getting the gas line going, the big AKLNG project. We're not there yet, but the president and the Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce and the Secretary of Interior and the Secretary of Energy, I've had discussions with all 5 of them, including the president, just in the last 2 days. Every single one of them has said one of the things that they're going to do when they're looking at our Asian partners, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, on any kind of tariff deal, is they're saying they want to make sure that that includes firm, long-term offtake agreements for Alaska LNG. I mean, that is remarkable. And the key to financing the entire Alaska LNG project is getting long-term, secure offtake agreements from the Japanese, from the Koreans, from the Taiwanese. And the President of the United States and his entire cabinet are telling these countries, hey, we will work with you to get agreements on lowering tariffs, but part of that agreement has to be buying Alaska LNG. And, that's never happened for this project. That's quite remarkable. So that's where I'm focused. And I even had a long Zoom meeting last night with the Vice President of Taiwan. And I've known her for a long time. And she told me Taiwan is committed to being the first and the biggest buyer of Alaskan LNG. and they're ready to sign up for that. The governor had a good trip out there. But longer term, the stock market goes up and down. I don't always focus on that. But longer term, our wealth is going to be our growing economy and a federal government that wants to help us, not crush us the way Biden did for 4 years. And that's what I'm focused on. And I think in that regard, we have a lot of good news happening.
All right, Senator, thank you. Last question. Senator Murkowski just gave a speech earlier about congressional oversight for tariffs. And you had mentioned tariffs. Just we'll want to get you kind of on the record characterizing your opinion and kind of where you stand, given that you did vote on the Canadian tariffs. So just kind of curious where your mind's at right now.
Sure. My statement on the Canadian tariffs, both with Canada, China, I gave a speech on the floor today on China and Mexico. Those initial tariffs were focused on the fentanyl crisis, all of those. And look, John, you've heard me talk about it. We have a huge fentanyl crisis in Alaska, maybe the worst crisis of any state per capita in the country. And I think that's where they're focused on with those initial tariffs. And to be honest, to get those countries to stop allowing fentanyl in to Alaska to poison our youth, especially. We've had more fentanyl overdoses per capita than any state in the country the last 2 years in a row. It's horrible. Almost 400 last year. And we're not a very big population state. That's mostly our youth. So I've been very, very focused on this issue. And if the president wants to use that kind of leverage to get other countries to stop flooding fentanyl into Alaska and other places, I'm supportive of it. Hopefully, those countries will listen on that and learn. But, we've been doing all kinds of stuff on fentanyl. I think with the president shutting down the border, unlike President Biden did, that's going to be helpful. I've launched this campaign with a lot of the students in Alaska, One Pill Can Kill, as a prevention campaign to try to get our youth to understand, hey, they're taking a pill that they're not sure where it comes from. If that has a speck of fentanyl in it, it literally can kill you. So we're doing this campaign, as I've told my team, we're putting a lot of time in it. We're working with a lot of the high schools. I've been out to a lot of the high schools to make the pitch. Hey, come on, you guys are the best ambassadors to the young people. Come join us. And if my campaign can save one Alaskan life, one young Alaskan from not overdosing on fentanyl, then it'll be worth it. So that's where I'm at on that. Look, the broader tariff negotiations, I think that they're going to start in earnest. The structure right now, which is going to all of our allies, trying to actually lower tariffs and include Alaska LNG in any kind of tariff reduction agreement, particularly with our Asian partners, I think would be important, really great for our state. But I also do, I'm still someone who believes in, open markets, trading with our allies, but that's with one giant asterisk. I just gave a speech on it. The Chinese Communist Party over the last 30 years has been a cancer on the international trading system. They have wrecked the international trading system. They cheat. They don't keep their commitments. They steal our intellectual property. They force transfers of technology. They subsidize industries like the steel industry that's wrecked the heartland of America. So what the president's doing with regard to, hey, we'll do deals around the world, but if China wants to not, we will really, really put tariffs on them. I actually think that particularly with regard to China and how damaging and non-reciprocal. I've had legislation, John, for years about China having to be reciprocal with us, and they're not at all. So I think we need to bring it to them and get good agreements with our allies, good agreements that would include purchasing Alaska natural gas. I think that's a good way forward.
All right, Senator, thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks a lot, John.
Appreciate you. All right, take care.
And thanks again to Senator Sullivan for speaking with us, and thank you for listening to In Depth Alaska. Please like and follow this podcast.